I'm Hannah from Full Abilities, and today I'm with another member of our project, Ola, and with today's guest, Sophie. Sophie, welcome. Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Of course.
Just first things first, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your illness?
Yeah, so my name's Sophie, and I do a lot of disability advocacy work on social media and online. I became ill at the age of 19 overnight, and I have multiple chronic illnesses. I've got endometriosis, I've got joint hypermobility syndrome, fibromyalgia, so a whole bunch of stuff that the sort of combined impact means that I am considered disabled because it affects my everyday life. And yeah, it's been a bit of a tough journey, but I have found a lot of comfort in the work that I do online. I found that really helpful.
People with invisible disabilities often face comments such as "do not look sick." How do you deal with misunderstanding and giving comments effectively?
Yeah, I think comments like that are really, really tough. And I think most people who have what's considered an invisible illness, so something that isn't necessarily immediately recognizable just upon like glancing at a person, you get comments like that, and it's really tough because it can undermine your reality and your experience. And I know I've really struggled with that, particularly when it comes from people in the medical industry, so like doctors, nurses, people like that, which I know is quite common. That's really hard to deal with, like psychologically, because the insinuation is that you can't possibly be ill simply because of the way that you look, which of course is not true. People can be really good at masking their symptoms, especially when they have chronic health conditions. You kind of get used to it to a certain extent, so you become quite good at sort of faking it basically and acting as if you're all right when really you're not. Um, so it's taken me years to get used to those sort of comments. And I don't know if there's a certain way that you can cope with it and let it like roll off your back and not care about it because they are damaging comments. But I think you just have to learn to build up a bit of an emotional wall around you and surround yourself with people who are supportive and understanding and know about your health conditions. Just remind yourself that your appearance has no correlation to whether or not you're ill. And if someone does make that comment, they're probably coming from quite a maybe a sheltered or naive or just oblivious place because they just don't understand. And I find as well, you can tell people that it in a respectful way. You can explain to them that your health condition is not something that is immediately visible. Say, if you're in a wheelchair, that's immediately visible. Most health conditions, most disabilities are actually invisible. And I think sometimes telling someone that can be helpful because sometimes people just don't realize, and it really does come from like an innocent, if you like, place, and they're not meaning to cause you any harm. So yeah, I'd always try and educate people as much as possible.
Yeah, it's very common to hear that, well, you look good, so you must feel okay, or oh, you're so young and beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
that's
young thing is another big one, isn't it? I think people assume that only sort of more elderly people can be disabled or can be ill. Like, yeah, and that's completely false. I mean, people are born with disabilities, so that logic doesn't quite make much sense. But it's a really common narrative that, yeah, can be really damaging to many people.
how have you come to accept or like tolerate if you have your illness or just everything that comes with it, all the changes and adjustments?
I think it's like a process of grief, especially. I mean, I can only speak for myself, who I was able-bodied, I was well, and then I became unwell. So there was a long time of grieving my health and everything that came with that, like the type of social life I had, the career options that I had, like all of these things, relationships that unfortunately suffer because of your health, that I had to like mourn and lose and then adjust to my new life. And actually, I am sort of with my mental health and with my like emotional well-being, I'm in a much better place now than I was before I was disabled. So it doesn't, being disabled doesn't like condemn you to being miserable for the rest of your life, which is another thing I think people sometimes think and is definitely not the case. Um, but it's like a constant process of adjusting to your new normal. And I'm not sure that ever ends. Every time I think, oh, I'm over it now, like I'm fine, I've completely accepted that I'm unwell, something new will happen, and then I'll get really upset all over again at my reality. So I'm, for me personally, I feel like this will be a forever thing and trying to get used to it. There'll always be times where I feel upset and um, I think I feel sometimes like it's unfair, which of course unfair, like bad things happen to everyone, difficult things happen to everyone. It's not how life works, but I think allowing yourself to feel upset, if that's how you feel, is important and not trying to like press those emotions down and pretend that you're fine if you're not, because that can end up being more damaging than any good. So just express however you're feeling at the moment, but it is a really difficult process.
Okay. So just to comment on what you just said, we'll just edit that
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
I think that once you get used to getting used to things,
yeah.
it gets easier, but it never ends. That
Yeah.
whenever something happens, and just wow, it's difficult. But I think the period of just adjusting
Mm.
gets shorter, at least in my experience. That's how it is.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The first, I would say, year or so of being ill was like the hardest in terms of trying to accept the situation because I was constantly like fighting against accepting it. Whereas now I'm much more open to accepting the situation because that's just how it is. Like I can't, nothing I do, no amount of like determination is going to change my reality. So there's no point in trying to fight it in that way. So I've tried to flip it into something more positive, try and get the goodness out of the situation rather than just like solely looking at all the bad stuff, the hard stuff.
Um, yeah, on your Instagram, besides chronic illness and disability awareness, you also publish or talk about poetry. And what role does art play in your life and maybe with coping with your chronic illness?
Mm. Yeah. So I've always, I say always, like from like maybe 15, 16, I started writing. And actually, if I think about it, writing generally, like journaling, things like that, is something I did when I was like ridiculously young, like maybe 6 or 7. I found like diary notes that I used to write. And I've always found writing, and now especially poetry, it's like a type of therapy for me, because I feel like it allows you to process everything that you're feeling and thinking in like the most open way. Because if you want, no one has to see it. You can keep it for yourself. So you don't have to filter like what you're writing, what you're saying. You can be like brutally honest with it. And I suppose it's the same thing with other forms of art. It's just a way of expressing yourself that gets everything off your chest. And it's honestly helped me so much, both with my coping with my physical health and with my mental health when that was bad. It's been like a real type of therapy for me. And yeah, it's an incredible tool to have. And it's something everyone can do. You can always like put a pen to paper, write something, draw something, like make something, and it's such a good outlet for sure.
Mental health is another topic that you mentioned frequently on your Instagram. And you also mentioned journaling now. Is it
Mhm.
kind of your way to cope with what you're going through? Do you have any other favorite ways to go what you cope with what you go through? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, journaling and writing things down is definitely one of my favorite ways. It's not so I don't like journal every day or anything like that. I try to write poetry regularly because that's in a way journaling because often I end up writing about whatever's on my mind, whatever's been bothering me. But I write when I'm in like crisis, if you like if I'm having a bit of a meltdown or I'm feeling like extremely anxious or whatever it might be, I just get my phone out, get my notes out, and I just write, like, splurge everything that's in my brain and write it all down. And it feels like such a relief after you've done that. I really, really can't recommend it enough. Whatever you're dealing with, if you try and write it down, and like I said, you don't have to show anyone, like it's for you. It's so helpful. But the other thing I do is I do therapy. I do talking therapy. It's now every 2 weeks, and I've done that, I don't know, for the last 5, 6 years now. And I feel like there's less of a taboo around therapy now, but there's still, it's still something I feel like people get uncomfortable talking about. And I don't know why, because it's such a positive thing. And 100% therapy saved my life. So, I don't see why people don't talk about it more because yeah, it's just amazing. And if you have access to that, I think probably everyone, if you have mental health issues or not, probably everyone would benefit from it. Um, but obviously, particularly if you struggle with your mental health, it's I feel like there's a type of therapy for everyone, probably, because there's so many different options. And without a doubt, it can save anyone's life when their mental health is bad.
Yeah, I agree with you that therapy is less of a taboo topic, but it is still quite uncomfortable for most people.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, it's extremely helpful, especially
mm,
when you are trying to figure out how to cope with what you're going through. With so that's very helpful tool as well.
yeah.
So you create inspiring content not only on Instagram but also on YouTube. What is
Mhm.
something you're hoping to achieve with sharing your story and talking about disability and chronic illnesses on the internet?
I think I want people to feel less alone. When I first was going through it, I didn't like post about it online. I just had like my private, if you like, account with friends on it, and that was it. And I hadn't really engaged with anyone. So my sister-in-law is disabled. That was it. I didn't know anyone else who had health issues or disability or anything. And I felt really lonely in what I was going through. So I just decided to start posting about it, have a page just like dedicated to that, and just talk about what I was going through in hopes of helping myself feel less lonely and helping other people who maybe were going through similar things feel less alone as well. And I feel like since then it's sort of morphed into this bigger thing where I now also really want to raise awareness of things like endometriosis because the bad experiences of people who have conditions like that with trying to get diagnosed, just like daily life, any care available to them. It's just so bad and it's globally like it's awful that I just saw an area that needs so much work, so much awareness, and I felt that I needed to do whatever I could, however big or small, to make an improvement in people's lives because yeah, there's a long way to go with endo, but with many invisible disabilities and illnesses because there's so much misunderstanding around them, both amongst the public and medical professionals, that yeah, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done.
And staying on the topic of social media and disability representation in social media, do you know any accounts, any people in the industry who are worth recommending?
Yeah.
You think representation is important?
Yeah, there's loads. There's one, I need to try and remember their like Instagrams now. So she's called Shan. I think her Instagram is Shan Lord. It's like Sian Lord. She's amazing. She does a lot of work sort of on social media, but also more widespread in the media. She does modeling, so she's an amputee, and she's done a lot of campaigns with that. And I think, yeah, representation in all forms of media is super important, and that goes for everything. I mean, that goes for gender, race, disability. Like it really does go for everything. Representation is important because you need, especially young people, I feel they need to be able to see someone that looks like them, because if they don't, I think it sort of gives off the feel of, well, where do I fit in the world? Like, what's my place? And yeah, the inclusivity is super important to show people that disabled people can be, you know, actors or can be models, can be doctors, scientists, like whatever they want to be. It makes a huge difference having that example growing up, and to people who are disabled, but also to people who aren't. I think it leads to more acceptance if they're seeing these people in the media, and less sort of stigma and a sort of dark sort of mystery that people sort of have around disabled people. And yeah, representation breaks that down a little bit.
Yes, is there anything you would like to add that we haven't covered yet, but you think is also important to mention?
Let me think. No, not really. I think it's just the important thing about disabilities, mental health, chronic illnesses, all that stuff is that we have open conversations about it. And the more we speak about it, the better things will get, and the better the understanding and all of those things. And we've come a long way with disability advocacy and disabled rights, but there's still very long way to go. And for me, the way forward is having these sort of like open interactions where we share our experiences and our thoughts.
Yes, thank you so much again for being here. We're very appreciative of what you do, and we're again very thankful that you agreed to do this. And yes, if anyone would like to check out Sophie's account, it will be linked in the description box of whatever it's called. And yes, thank you for watching, and see you in the next interview.